3.3 and 3.4. When you get your quiz, please compare your quiz to these answers so that you can see how the intended response was supposed to be. Let's take a look at our first question. The first 4 questions asked you to perform the indicated operation and told you that f of x was equal to 5x to the third power minus 2x, and g of x was 3 times x to the third power. So question number 1 wanted you to add the 2 functions together. So very simply, substitute in. There is f of x plus g of x. Now, when we substitute in the g of x, you want to do it in parentheses, but since we're adding, we can pretty much ignore the parentheses. What we want to do is combine like terms. So x to the third and x to the third are like terms, so 5 plus 3 is 8. X to the third. Let's try that again. There we go. And then minus 2x, which was all by its lonesome. F of x minus g of x. So now we have 5x to the third minus 2x minus 3x to the third. Again, you can have this in parentheses, but since it's all by itself, not really worried about the distribution of that negative. I already know that this is going to make it negative 3x to the third. So 5x to the third minus 3x to the third would give us 2x to the third minus the 2x that's by itself. That's all we have to do. For multiplying f of x times g of x. So we have 5x to the third minus 2x. Here we do want to put this in parentheses, since that whole term represents f of x. And then multiplied by gx to the third. 2 terms times 1 term, let's go ahead and distribute the 3x to the third. So 3 times 5 is 15. X to the third times x to the third. We're going to add those together. Add the exponents when you multiply powers. Minus 2 times 3 is 6. X to the first times x to the third, would be x to the fourth. So this is your final answer. With division, 5x to the third minus 2x over 3x to the third. We want to go ahead and simplify, and the easiest way to simplify here is to take and get rid of one of those x's. So when we do that, if I take an x out here, I can take out an x from all of the terms so leaving me with 5x squared minus 2x over 3x squared. Now again, this is still not simplified enough. We have 5x squared over 3x squared minus 2 over 3x squared. Now, this part over here is simplified, but this is not on the left-hand side. We need to get rid of that x squared. So it's 5 times x squared over 3 times x squared. So I'm not subtracting the coefficients. I'm getting rid of the x squared times x squared. So we are left with 5 thirds minus 2 over 3x squared. If you rewrite this in an equivalent way, then that's fine. Negative 2 thirds, negative 2 over 3x squared plus 5 thirds, that's fine. But this is the most basic way to write it at first. All right, let's take a look at our next slide. Clear off the board. So now we're doing the compositions where we are combining f of g of x and g of f of x. This is where I was telling you to be very careful about your substitutions. When we do f of x, it's 5x to the third minus 2x still. So for f of x, I'm taking out x and I'm putting in g of x, which is 3x to the third. To the third minus 2 times 3x to the third. So everywhere there was an x, I'm replacing it with the g of x function. Now here's where you have to watch your distribution. I have an exponent on the outside of the first parentheses. I'm going to distribute it to both of the multiplication factors on the inside. So I have 5 times 3 to the third, which is 27, times x to the third, which would be x to the ninth. Now over here to the right, I don't have any exponent outside the parentheses, so all I need to do is multiply 2 times 3 to get 6, and then I have x to the third. That's not really a distribution, it's just 2 times 3 times x to the third. Simplify over here to the right, again, it's 5 times 27 times x to the ninth, so this is 135 x to the ninth minus 6x to the third. That's your simplified function. Now I wanted you to go ahead and simplify because really that wasn't too complicated, you just had to watch your substitutions. Now for question number 6, g of f of x, take out 3x to the third, we're going to take out that x and put in 5x to the third minus 2x to the third power. This is all I wanted for your answer. Remember I told you I just wanted to see the first step with the substitution. Because if you did this correctly, when you distribute, you're not distributing this 3 right here. That doesn't go and make this 15x to the ninth minus 6x to the third. All right? It tells you that you are wanting to multiply these factors 3 times, and you're going to have to use FOIL multiple times unless you remember the special property, the rule for cubing, which most of us don't. I honestly don't remember it. I have to look it up. I would FOIL all this, and there's too much room for error. I wasn't concerned with this whole thing becoming more simplified. I just wanted to know that you knew how to substitute in. So this was all I was looking for. It was just that initial substitution. Wow. Need to hit a bit more force apparently. Alright. For verifying that f of x and g of x are inverse functions, all we were wanting to look for here is when you substitute in using our composite functions, does it simplify to x? So, 2/5 times 5/2 x minus 5/6 plus 1/3. Simplify this out. 2/5 times 5/2 would be 1x. 2/5 times negative 5 to the 6, well this would simplify out, and then we have 1/3. So that becomes x minus 1/3 plus 1/3, which of course then this simplifies, and so all of this equals 1x. So great, that simplifies for the first part. Now let's check to see if g of f of x does the same thing. So 5/2 times 2/5 x plus 1/3 minus 5/6. Distribute, we get x plus 5/6 minus 5/6 cancels out, so we are left with just the 1x again. So since f of g of x and g of f of x both equaled 1x, we know that yes, they are inverse functions. The other alternative way was to take f of x and then find the inverse function of that. So flip-flop your x and your y. And solve for y, get it by itself. So x minus 1/3 equals 2/5 times y, multiplied by 5/2. So y is by itself. And then we get 5/2 x minus 5/6. This is what our inverse of x would be. And it happens to be the same function as g of x. So since f inverse of x is equal to g of x, we know that these are inverse functions. So I accepted either of those two ways of solving the problem. Alright, for questions 8 and 9, just define the inverse, very simple. Go through the process of flipping your x and your y. So x equals 3y plus 10, subtract 10, divide by 3. Inverse notation. Now here, if you said x minus 10 over 3, that's fine, but really what I was looking for is 1/3 x minus 10 over 3. So this is the better answer. All right, for our next one, we have x is equal to negative 3/8 y to the 7th. So we're going to multiply by negative 8/3 on both sides. So now we have negative 8/3 x is equal to y to the 7th. And here you could either multiply by the exponent of 1/7, or you could just take the 7th root. I didn't particularly care how you did it. Although let's put proper function notation here. So the 7th root of negative 8/3 x, or you could have said in parentheses negative 8/3 x raised to the 1/7. Either one was accepted. This was kind of the one I was really going for, but again, they're both equivalent, so it doesn't matter how you did it. And for our last question, the word problem. All right, the cost in dollars of G gasolines of gasoline can be modeled by C of G is equal to 2.25 G. The amount of the gasoline used by an SUV can be modeled by G of D is equal to 25 thousandths D to the 1.24, where D is the distance in miles. Find C of G of D and evaluate C of G of 500, and what does that represent? So the first part is finding, let's move that back there. First part was finding what C of G of D was. So C is equal to 2.25, and then we're going to substitute G in with 0.025 D to the 1.24. All right, multiply this out. And you get your C of G of D function. Verify that that's the correct value. .25 times 0.025. Oops, I have an extra 0. Ignore that 0. All right, then to figure out the part 2, the evaluation, we're going to plug in 500. So 0.05625 times 500 to the 1.24. So 500 raised to 1.24 times 0.05625 gives you 124.981. That's US money, so all we care about is 124.98. And then C of G of 500, what does that represent? It represents the cost in dollars to drive 500 miles. All right, if you have any questions, please come see me. The test retake will be on Wednesday.